Hey, Chicago, welcome back to Get Down to Business. Thrilled to be joined by returning guest Dr. Merrill Matthews, resident scholar with the Institute for Policy Innovation in Dallas. Merrill, welcome back to the program. It sounds like the EPA is bowing to the Greens and reversing course on fracking. Merrill, welcome back to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So tell us about this little bit of a change that we're hearing about, that the EPA is now reversing course in a long-awaited report that it doesn't have enough information about fracking. What's going on?
Well, last year they released the preliminary report, and in that report, this was on fracking, and in the preliminary report they said they found no evidence of, I'm quoting now, widespread systemic impacts on drinking water. Now they went through and said we do find some occasional cases where there's human error, isolated incidents in which some fracking fluid or something is spilled on the ground from someplace, but there was no widespread. There was no evidence of widespread impact. And so they had said they'd come out with the final report. They did this past Tuesday, in which that initial finding was essentially dropped completely from the report, and they go through and they highlight the various incidences, which I said these are typically isolated local instances where you have somebody who makes a mistake, some mechanical error or something of that nature. They highlight that, but they drop their original conclusion, which there was nothing that over the year that sort of created this incidence of, oh, yes, now we know there is widespread impact on drinking water. It's just something that the EPA changed its finding, and I think that was from pressure from the environmental groups and the administration.
Wow. Well, it's a 1,200-page report, and they've been working on it for 5 years. And as you mentioned, Merrill, it was the draft report was in June 2015, which had a completely different conclusion than the report that was released this week. Merrill, jumping ahead to the next administration, Trump administration, there's going to be a new administrator of the EPA, Scott Pruitt. Obviously, this report has been released. They've been working on this for 5 years. What changes can we expect on fracking in policy and in tone coming from the next administration?
Well, Scott Pruitt, as you mentioned, the Attorney General from Oklahoma, is the nominee for the Environmental Protection Agency. Rick Perry, the former governor of Texas, is the nominee for the Department of Energy. And I think we're going to see a dramatically new approach to this, which is what's happened over the past several years is the EPA has been given a free hand to do a number of things that it's not empowered to do by Congress and by law. And there have been some challenges to that. Scott Pruitt, ironically, was one of the leading attorneys general, where they had there was several lawsuits by multiple states, many cases 25 states or more, suing the EPA because of its overreach, and now he will be in charge of it, presumably, and I think he'll just restrain that organization back to doing what it is legislated to do by Congress, and I think the same thing will be true with Rick Perry.
Well, it sounds like you mentioned earlier that the EPA has been playing politics with this report. Do you think that, again, Scott Pruitt, Rick Perry, that they're going to take that out of the equation and really focus on the facts? Because we know as small business owners, we know as members of what's driving the economy that fracking can positively impact employment, positively impact the economy in general. Where does politics end and the facts begin?
Well, that never actually, there was no dividing line between this administration. And as you point out, turns out that a lot of the drilling companies and so forth are small businesses. We talk about the Exxons of the world, but this is oftentimes driven by small companies that have 3, 4, 5 wells out there, handful of employees. And I think Scott Pruitt's going to change the focus of the EPA to get it back to what it was initially supposed to be focused on, and trying to make, and I suspect he may downsize that organization some as well. The EPA has a role, but it has not been playing that role now for a number of years. It has expanded its powers. Congress has let it get away with that under Democratic administrations, but I think we'll see that scaled back significantly, and I think that will be good for the economy.
Well, I think it'll be fascinating to see what comes over the coming months, including the confirmation hearings for those two incoming members of President-elect Trump's cabinet. Scott Pruitt, the current Attorney General of Oklahoma, and Rick Perry, former governor of Texas, as both EPA and Department of Energy. And I think we'll start to see a lot of changes. And it's important to stay engaged on this issue because as business owners, this impacts us in a major way. It's not just states. I know you're out in Texas, and but here in Illinois, fracking does have its ripple effects, and it is really important. So Merrill Matthews, once again, resident scholar with Institute for Policy Innovation in Dallas. You regularly contribute to many publications, including Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Barron's, USA Today, and the Washington Times. How can people learn more about your research on this topic and continue to follow your research on this issue?
They can go to IPI.org. That's IPI, that's Institute for Policy Innovation, IPI.org.
IPI.org. Dr. Merrill Matthews, thank you so much for joining us on the air.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, coming up after the break, we'll be chatting with Ken Coates, who's going to be talking to us a little bit about his work in as the premier background investigation solutions firm in the United States. We'll be talking with him a little bit about his practice and the services that he's providing to the business community. You're listening to the show all about small business jobs and entrepreneurship. Fantastic lineup of guests this week. We just spoke with Merrill Matthews about fracking. We spoke with Jim Bernetti about soft landings recovery, and Bruce Matcha about customer service. Got a lot more for you coming up after this quick break. Chicago, don't touch the dial. We'll be right back.